Hello, and welcome to Improbable Things. I'm J. Grace Pennington, and this is my podcast where I share 6 improbable thoughts before breakfast, which consists of 6 thoughts about reading, writing, or some form of storytelling. And I've finally got my voice back, so I'm excited to be with all of you and have my 6 things ready. So let's go. So number 1, just a little update on the editing for my book, Firmament Humanoid. It's continuing to go very, very slowly. I've just kind of hit that spot where I've had a lot of difficulty moving forward, mostly just to other things moving on or going on in my life. It's not really that the book is being difficult, thankfully. It's just been hard to get to lately. So at least there's that, though. I do feel that, again, it's going well and smoothly when it does happen. And after not even being able to get to it for a while, I was able to get some solid work done on it for the last few days. So that's good. Hopefully can continue that. And definitely the most challenging part is so far, obviously adding in the new parts, editing the parts that are already there is not nearly as difficult. The bones are there, the framework is there, so it's less work. But writing in the new stuff, especially because it is these completely new segments from a third-party perspective, and it's new characters that I'm not familiar with at all, so just kind of having to come up with everything from scratch for those parts has been a little bit of a challenge, but I think it will really help the book. So hopefully it'll all be worth it. So number 2, this is something interesting that I tried this past week. For, having published books, I can go on the Kindle Unlimited, Kindle Direct Publishing, where my books are published and see reports on, how many books I've sold this month, royalties, past month's royalties, etc. And I had never thought of this before, but someone in a group that I'm in suggested going into your book sales, and instead of putting, this month or last month or whatever, you can actually put lifetime and see what you've sold, for the entire time, ever since you began publishing. And the person that was suggesting this found it interesting because you can look and see how many of each of your different books have sold and how they're performing compared to each other, etc. So I thought that would be very fascinating and decided to do it, and it was very interesting. So I wasn't surprised at all to see that Firmament Rady Alloway was the number 1 seller, because, it has been out longest, but mostly it's because the book is free, and it's been free for many years now. And so it tends to get a lot of downloads, and I do, a lot of promotions for it. And again, since people are downloading it free, doesn't necessarily mean that all of them are reading it. In fact, it's quite likely many of them are not, but hopefully many of them are. But even if they're not, it does help with the Amazon algorithms and things like that. So there was that, not surprising. What did surprise me is that my book, Never, which is my Western mystery, the second book I ever published, was second and not that far behind, even though it's not free. And I've done some free promotions on it, but I think it's generally like $4.99, which actually is one of my more expensive ebooks. So I found that very fascinating. And then, it was second by only, I think, a couple thousand. And then right next to it, by a difference of a few more thousand, I think, was my book October. And then all the rest of my Firmament series was sitting below that at significantly less. Like they were all around 400, 500 sales. And what that really showed me, which is kind of sad for me, is but it's not entirely surprising, but the fact that my non-speculative fiction books just perform much better than my science fiction. And it's sad because sci-fi is really my passion, and especially with this series, it is my real pet project and my favorite thing to work on, and I have the intention of publishing so many more. However, it's just true that that's not a genre that does great, especially like Christian young adult science fiction. There are not a lot of books in that field. And yeah, it's just there's not a very high demand for it. Whereas historical fiction and just sort of general fiction, which is what Never and October are much more popular genres. So it did kind of make me think maybe one thing I should be doing is putting more effort into promoting those. And because I have my series is what I have a real passion for, it may, they may help sort of fund the series as I'm moving forward on it and working on it. But anyway, it was very interesting. The other sad part was when I looked at my actual lifetime earnings. So this is royalties from literally the past decade of publishing. It was pretty sad. For 10 years of work, I'm not going to give numbers, but it was discouraging. So that kind of just motivated me that, and I think I really have not, especially like right at first I put effort into marketing like in the first, few years. And then lately I am, but there was like this massive wasteland in between there where I was putting no effort at all into marketing and I would make like a few cents a month. So it did confirm to me that working on marketing like I am, trying different things, putting real money and effort into that is what I need to be doing. And in the spirit of that, my number 3 item on the list for today is that I decided that for the purpose of promoting my books, I really need to try getting on TikTok. And that is something I have resisted for a very long time, and I still have no desire whatsoever to do it. And I told my husband when I was telling him I'm doing this, I'm like, so don't disown me, but because he hates TikTok probably as much or more than I do. But I've heard so many places that TikTok is the only social media site right now that is really worth anything when it comes to book promotion. It apparently has a really strong presence among, readers and book lovers. And I have seen firsthand a lot of the other authors in my Kindle Vella groups have done really, really well by promoting on TikTok, and that's just with their Vellas. And so I've been already for a couple months now doing a little research, what kind of content is good for authors to put on TikTok, etc. But I've still been resisting it, partly because I hate it and partly because I'm easily overwhelmed by doing new things. But I think seeing those numbers really did confirm, again, to me, I need to try new things. And this is what I keep hearing is the thing to do. So I'll let y'all know when that's up and running. And we'll see how that goes. Well, number 4, I thought I would share. My middle daughter just turned 3, and all of my daughters love books, even though none of them can read yet. But my 3-year-old, her favorite book is Green Eggs and Ham, and she, quote unquote, reads it all the time. And so, of course, she generally knows the story and all that because I've read it to her so many times. So she'll kind of read it based on her memory and the pictures, but she kind of also mixes it up with Go Dog Go, because all she does is turn each page and go, do you like it with a house? No, I do not. Goodbye. And then she turns the page and she's like, do you like it with a fox? No, I do not. Goodbye. Every single page goes like that. And I think she's confusing it with the Go Dog Go, which is another favorite of ours, where the 2 little dogs one keeps coming out saying, do you like my hat? And the other one goes, I do not like your hat. Goodbye. And they love that part, which me and my siblings always did when we were kids. So it's just so hilarious to listen to her read it. And I love that, just them being so familiar with their favorite books. And I don't know, I used to do that too. Like, I have memories and have also been told about me being like, just thought I would memorize a book, or I thought because I liked the Little Critters books when I was a kid, I thought every book was by Mercer Mayer. So I would take every book and say the title and go, by Mercer Mayer. And for a while, my girls did the same thing with Dr. Seuss. And it's just fun to watch the learning and discovering, and again, to see them just loving books. So number 5, something a little different today on my currently reading. I actually just finished one book, so I thought I would mention a little bit the book that I'm about to start, which is different because it's a book that I'm going to be beta reading. So not something that's already published. And I'm going to get to read, I just was sent the book last night, the newest installment in the Red Rain series. Actually, I don't remember what this series is actually called, but Red Rain is the first book in the series by Rachel Newhouse. And this has been really, really fun to get to be involved in because Red Rain was published just I think a little bit before my first book, Grady Alloway, and there's a lot of similarities between the two books, which is super fun because the author and I were really close friends. At the time, obviously it's harder to maintain those kinds of long distance friendships as adults, but we still follow and care about and are really involved in each other's publishing journeys, which is really special. And I'm just grateful because I know that the first book, Red Rain, was published, and then even though it was her dream to continue with the series, it took a while to, I guess, I don't know the whole journey, but just there were several years before any more books were published, and now she's been able to go back and re-release the first one and really knock a bunch more out. So this is book 4 in the series, and there's also been some small novellas with content kind of in the same story and in the same world, which I've also been able to beta read, and I'm really enjoying them. The storyline is really exciting and I enjoy the characters. The writing is good. These are great books, and also again because they're in the same genre as mine, they're young adult Christian sci-fi. It's a kind of story that I have, again, a huge passion for, and seeing others in this journey with me of trying to create books like this that we would have loved to see when we were younger, and hopefully introducing Christian young adults to these kinds of stories is so exciting, and I'm really looking forward to reading this one. Obviously, I don't have thoughts on it yet, and if I did, I couldn't share them because the book is still a secret. But definitely, if you haven't read the first 3, plus I want to say there are 2 novellas. I could be forgetting something. But if you haven't read the books in that series, and especially if you enjoy Firmament, I would definitely recommend these books. Because even though the series have taken 2 very different directions, they did start off similar. And again, they are this young adult Christian sci-fi. There's a lot of, interesting moral dilemmas and twists and turns and things like that in both of them. So definitely recommend. So number 6 today, probably most of you have seen the Spotify Wrapped thing that they do where they just give you some stats for your listening, music, podcasts, whatever, over the past year, what your most listened to songs were, how many minutes you listened, etc. And I enjoy those. I enjoy seeing other people's. I enjoyed seeing mine. But what I didn't know is, so the app that I use, or the service that I use for this podcast, which is called Anchor, they are actually owned by Spotify. And so they have their own version of the same thing for podcast creators. And I found that very interesting too. And probably the most interesting thing to me, and I don't know whether to take it as sort of good or bad, they informed me that this podcast in the past year I created 689 minutes of content, which they say is more than 93% of other creators in my category, which is the arts category. And I didn't think that amount of minutes sounded like much, and that doesn't surprise me because I do this only weekly and it's only 15 to 20 minutes. Obviously, a lot of podcasts are much more prolific than that. So the fact that it was more than 93% of others creators in that category did surprise me. And I couldn't help wondering, is that good? Am I being more consistent than a lot of the other creators? But I also know that so many people have or want to have podcasts, and I'm guessing there probably are a lot of creators, and maybe especially in this category, I don't really know, who may start a podcast and just not really follow through, because it does take a lot of effort. And so maybe that skews the statistics a little. I really have no idea, but it was interesting to just hear all of that. And of course I got to the stats on what my most popular episode was and all of that. But it just also got me thinking, like, why do I do this podcast? It's been over a year now that I've been doing it, and it just feels like it hasn't really gone anywhere. Like, I don't get a ton of listeners, although I will say the listeners I do have tend to be very faithful and very enthusiastic about the podcast, which interestingly is how my Firmament series has gone. It doesn't have a ton of readers, but the fans I have been so faithful and have been so enthusiastic about the series with me on this whole journey. And so there is a real sweetness to that, where those people do encourage me so much, and hearing from those people, whether it comes to this podcast or to my books or whatever, it just means so much to me to know, like, even if I don't have the numbers